to cost in the NHS. In reality, yes, you have an average, yes, you have a median, but it's massively driven by significant events, one of which, for example, is a birth. And the migrant, the foreign national birth rate is 30% higher than it is for British nationals. And each one of those births costs £5,500. There's absolutely no justification for keeping the number of that. Now, there are also, as you say, a number of exemptions inside the IHS. One of which would be for ILR. Now, obviously, our plan is to abolish ILR altogether, but if Rachel Reeves doesn't want to do that, she could just remove that exemption. Obviously, asylum seekers, all of these other sorts of people don't have to currently pay. Nor, by the way, I want to be crystal clear, NHS workers are currently exempt. We would retain that exemption. So we're saying even in a net zero immigration scenario, it would raise £3 billion. Based on current OBR forecasts for immigration this year, it would be £5 billion.
David Burke from the Mirror.
Hiya, thank you very much. In a hypothetical situation where a company were to go bust, it's a big local employer in an area, under your proposals, the British citizens on the workforce would have the safety net of support, but their colleagues, neighbours from the EU or from overseas in some way wouldn't. They'd also have their own living costs, their own families, etc. Do you think that's fair, and do you think the wider public think that's fair?
I just think the model that we've been pursuing for basically quarter of a century of importing as much cheap foreign labour as we possibly can has been a benefit to some employers, especially big employers, but the net effect on the British economy, it's been catastrophic on productivity, and it has, as the years have gone by, just brought upon us a massive range of social costs through dependence, etc. We cannot continue with this current model. I understand that for some people there'll be short-term concerns. Of course there will be. But what we're saying is we have to turn this around. And frankly, you know, to have so many millions of people of working age not working is the thing that is going to have to be addressed. Thank you. Peter Walker from The Guardian.
I'm hidden here, so I'm going to stand up. If I can return to the very, very first question of this quite long press conference, which you didn't completely answer from the BBC, has the party modelled at all what the economic consequences of your actions on EU nationals, what would be the case if the EU hit back, for example, on trade, or are you convinced that they won't? And if I may, I asked Richard this yesterday. He basically said he didn't particularly have any concerns about the views of your new head of the student organisation, who has argued quite vehemently on X that people from minority ethnic backgrounds are not necessarily British, even if they're UK born and bred. Do you share Matthew Goodwin's views? And given the fact he's in the party, does this indicate that your proud record you've talked about a lot of keeping far-right elements out of your parties, is that era now gone?
No, and we will always keep far-right elements out of our party. I've always done that. You've known me for goodness knows how many years. I've always made sure we've never had BNP types, etc. in. I think what Goodwin said, it was nuanced. And if you look at the nuance, it perhaps doesn't look as ugly as you try to make out, is the point that I would make. But of course, as soon as you set up a youth wing, you're going to have problems with everybody. And we knew that before we did it. I would argue with Europe, they're still selling us lots of cars, you know. They're still selling us lots of cars. We're still buying 20 million bottles of champagne every year. You know, we need to get back to a basic trade agreement. And look, you know, have we costed? There are all sorts of good and bad scenarios that can happen every single day of the week. I am confident we can come to a much better deal with the European Union. I was going to ask one last question. Robert Peston, do you have a question as you were late in the room?
I think I'm interviewing you, so can I say it?
Fine, very good. Yes, one more. Sorry, I apologise. Not on my list, I apologise.
No, I'm later. Thank you. You've painted a very gloomy picture of the public finances in this press conference, but would it be fair to say that the solutions you're offering, in contrast to your avowedly radical solutions on immigration, are perhaps cautious? 25 billion savings is just about half what the Tories suggest they could find, 47 billion. Even your PIP changes are less than what Labour thought they could find when they first thought they could manage this. So is that the message you want to give to the electorate? We're radical on immigration, but there will be incremental change on the public finances?
what we've given you today is just one snapshot of one area. We might remind you of what we said about the Boris wave and indefinite leave to remain and what the cost of those individuals are likely to be over the course of the coming decades. 200.
Yeah, I mean, it's hundreds of billions if you actually were to look at the Boris wave and that
Over
impact.
decades.
Over decades, indeed. And look, we're going to have a lot more to announce in this regard. I will say it's quite funny, though, with the media. You know, 1 minute we're putting big numbers out there and we're accused of fantasy economics, and then we put smaller numbers out there and we're that's a bit cautious. So look, here's the point. Here's the point. As Nigel said, this is a very specific set of proposals for Rachel Reeves that she could enact immediately. And by the way, that 25 billion, that compounds, as is in the document that we will share with you, that compounds significantly and multiplies over the coming years.
Thank you, everybody. Cool. How many questions we did? 20 something?
No idea.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.